Hello, reflective parents. My name is Cindy Hovington. I am the founder of Curious Neuron, and today inside the Reflective Parent Club, I'd like to cover one of these mini courses that we have. This one is called Breaking Cycles of Dysregulation. So if you are a parent that is working really hard to break the cycles, to learn about your emotion regulation and to stop feeling dysregulated almost on a daily basis, then this mini course can help you in just a few moments as you watch this and work your way through the Becoming a Reflective Parent course, which is the main course that we have here. This might help you understand emotions a little bit better, a little bit faster. All right. So, in case we haven't met, hi, we haven't seen each other at a weekly call. My name is Cindy. I am the founder of Curious Neuron. I'm the host of the Reflective Parenting podcast. I'm an international speaker on emotional health and parental well being. And Curious Neuron has been around for a long time. We've been here talking about or sharing the science of emotion regulation. It was specific around kids at the beginning, and now it's specific about parents and a little bit about their kids as well. But the vision that I have for everything that I do here is that if we truly want to help a child and support their health and well-being, then the parent needs to be included in this picture. And I don't think that there's enough out there doing that. So this mini course in particular, the goal is to help you understand the basics of emotions and help you build self-awareness to increase the chances of you breaking these generational cycles of emotion dysregulation. And so if you grew up in a home where emotions were not talked about, you had a parent that was constantly dysregulated or suppressing their emotions or always yelling and not showing you how to cope with these in a healthy way, then this mini course is right for you. We're going to be covering three mini objectives. So first, what is emotional intelligence and emotion regulation skills are part of that. Then understanding how emotion dysregulation impacts relationships in adult relationships. And then we're going to look at the relationships between ourselves and our child. So learning how emotion regulation improves the way that you parent and how you parent your child. I'm going to make sure that I share these three tools with you inside this mini course. So first, I'd love to help you notice your dysregulation. Second, we're going to notice the temperature of a conflict. So when two people are dysregulated in a conversation, but understanding exactly what that looks like. And then the third is going to be about applying the pause to control your inner dialogue. Before we dive into that, there's a whole reason why Curious Neuron exists. So, kind of like what I just shared with you before, 63% of parents don't even know how to support their child with emotions. And so 48% say that they're just completely overwhelmed by stress. How does this link together? These are not two separate stats? They are, but they're not. So first, if we don't know how to regulate our own emotions, it makes it really hard to regulate things like stress and overwhelm. We feel more stressed because we don't know how to cope with it. And when we don't know how to regulate our own emotions, it makes it really hard to co-regulate and cope and help our child cope with their emotions. The part that we need to be aware of as parents is when we struggle to cope with our emotions, there is a higher chance of us maltreating our child, or it could be through the discipline method that we use. It can be through neglect if we're ignoring their emotions and in a way that is considered emotional neglect. And so often the child pays the price, which is why Curious Neuron exists. If we can support or better support and educate parents, then this will trickle down to support the well-being of a child. And so that's why we believe that we can do this. So basically, we want to break these generational cycles of dysregulation. So this is what it looks like inside a home. When a child acts out, they are dysregulated and we don't see that. Sometimes we see the surface, we see the behavior, and we miss that it's communicating some sort of emotion dysregulation. Maybe the child doesn't know how to cope with frustration. Maybe the child doesn't know how to cope with anger or disappointment or sadness. And so it comes out as a behavioral issue. Parents get triggered by this rather than seeing past that because we don't know how to cope with our own emotions. And so we easily get triggered by that. And then when we're triggered, we're missing the opportunity to show our child how to cope with that emotion. We're just disciplining them or getting frustrated with them. The child doesn't learn how to regulate that emotion, and the patterns and cycles and challenges continue, and we get stuck in this cycle. And so if you can recognize this cycle in your own home, where you are stuck in a cycle with your child acting out, it needs to start with you. And that is why Curious Neuron exists. And so, if you are new to Curious Neuron, we support parents through evidence based tips and strategies and education. We do this so that you learn how to manage your stress and manage your emotions. And then you know how to teach your child how to do the same thing. And so, when you become a parent that knows how to regulate their emotions, well, you are less stressed. You have stronger and healthier relationships in your entire life, whether it's with your family, with your friends, with your partner, and with your child. You have better mental health and well being, and your child struggles less with behavior. Your child also performs better academically, and then your child also, according to research, will have healthier friendships and relationships later on. So there's good reason for us to work on our emotion regulation skills. So, how about we begin with understanding what is emotional intelligence? So many of us are stuck in this state of dysregulation. And I personally believe that many of us don't even realize that we are stuck in this state of dysregulation. So Dr. Bruce Perry, who's the author of What Happened to You, co-authored by Oprah, he's a researcher and a clinician, and he says that a result of the brain and body's it is dysregulation is a result of the brain and body's inability to return to a balanced state after being activated by stress or adversity. And so that's what we need to teach our brain and nervous system to do. If we grew up in an environment where we were constantly dysregulated and we didn't learn how to regulate it ourselves, how do you calm your nervous system down? What sort of thoughts do you need to have? What sort of sensations do you need to have? Is it a warm hug, or that pressure from a hug? Is it a blanket for the warmth? Is it ice? Do you need the opposite? Everybody is different. Maybe you need silence, and we're going to talk about all that. But really understanding, at least recognizing when you are in a state of dysregulation. So, part of emotional intelligence, the reason why we are talking about that is it starts with you. Emotional intelligence has four components, and the first two have to do with yourself. So, self awareness, which is the ability to recognize and understand your own emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. So, this is all from Goldman's research early in the 90s. So, very early research. He was one of the pioneers around this, right? When we started talking about emotional intelligence. And this was fairly new research. And so self-awareness begins with you when you start to understand and recognize your patterns and your emotions and your thoughts. Then the second part is self-regulation, the ability to manage and control your emotions and impulses and behaviors in a healthy and constructive way. So you can't regulate unless you have the self-awareness. If your partner says something to you and it's triggering, you have to first recognize that, not react to it internally and get frustrated and get stuck in that frustration. You need to be self-aware enough to be able to respond to it rather than react. That's the regulation. That's how it steps in. But these two are important, and you cannot regulate without the self-awareness piece. Then it's about you and other people. And so social awareness comes next. Here at Curious Neuron, we talk about parental awareness. So not just understanding the other person, but in particular, understanding your child. So social awareness is defined as the ability to understand and empathize with others' emotions, perspectives, and needs. We call it parental awareness. If we can do this with their child, we are going to build their emotional intelligence. And that's really important as well. And then the last one is relationship management. And you'll see in the course that you might be taking called Becoming a Reflective Parent, there are four sections. Self-awareness, part one. Part two is self-regulation. Part three is parental awareness. And part four is relationship management. We cover all four parts of emotional intelligence. And relationship management is the ability to use self-awareness, self-management, and social awareness to effectively build and maintain positive relationships, which is hard for many of us. So is there room for improvement for my emotional intelligence skills? What if I'm 35 or 45 and I've never worked on this before? And actually, I see the impact of it now. I'm always stressed. I don't have any healthy and strong relationships. Actually, haven't had any in as long as I could remember. I'm struggling with my child. Their behavior is through the roof. I'm overwhelmed. I'm not happy at work. I don't have close friends. If you can relate to these, then yes, It is something that you can work on. But luckily, our brain has the capacity to learn, even at this age, at any age, as long as we're willing to put the work in it. And so don't think that by just watching one course of 30 minutes that everything will be different tomorrow. Sure, you might gain the awareness. Maybe you will be more aware tomorrow of your responses or reactions to your child, or maybe your reactions to your partner. But it will take a lot of noticing and a lot of moments of reflection. Why am I acting like this? What is leading to me acting like this or reacting or responding that way? It will take many of those moments to be able to see a difference in how you respond to somebody, in how your thoughts kind of trigger you or calm you. And that's going to take time. This is why the Reflective Parent Club renews every 3 months, because you need at least 3 months to start noticing the difference. And we've seen it in our parents. It takes time. So yes, of course, there's room for improvement. So when I feel triggered, do I react impulsively or take time to respond thoughtfully? So these are all my sort of checkpoints to see if there's room for you to improve that. Am I aware of which situations dysregulate me? Can I name the emotion I'm feeling in the moment? Can I recognize patterns in how my emotions impact my decisions or behavior, especially in work or relationships? When I experience tension with someone, do I focus on being right or on understanding what's going on beneath the surface in both of us? How often do people say I don't listen well or misunderstand what they're feeling? So these are the reflections I want you to think about, like, should I be working on my emotional intelligence skills? And there are scales inside our main course called Becoming a Reflective Parent that will help you gain awareness around this. So, understanding your dysregulated brain. Your brain is constantly scanning the environment and asking itself, am I safe? Or do I need to protect myself? And when we realize that we can be in a relationship or, sorry, in a conflict with somebody that we're in a relationship with, and they might say something that doesn't make me feel safe, makes me feel like I need to protect myself. Maybe we're in a situation, I know some parents who don't feel safe driving, especially when their kids are in the car. And so what happens when your kids are in the back and they're screaming, or your toddler's having a tantrum, or your two kids are arguing? Well, you are already dysregulated. And now that you're driving the car and your kids are screaming, you don't have the capacity to say, what's going on? Who said what? Let's take a moment to breathe. No, you don't have the capacity. You're already dysregulated. And so what do you say? Quiet, everybody stop. And you yell at them. And that's why it is so important to first notice and understand what dysregulates us. So here at Curious Neuron, we don't dwell on the past. So I'm not going to be asking you at any point inside the Reflective Parent Club or any of these courses or reflection prompts to really dig into your past. We are here. We help you, sorry, to build self-awareness today to create the transformation tomorrow. So I believe, and we believe here at Curious Neuron, that the more you can understand yourself today, it'll truly help you work on yourself. You don't have to dig deep. You might want to understand patterns, but that involves understanding patterns of yourself now. And that means that you need to reflect. So here's a new perspective that will change maybe a lot for you. So I used to look at dysregulation as the green, yellow, and red zone. Green was fully regulated, yellow was slightly dysregulated, and red was fully dysregulated. But something was missing because what we viewed the red section of this dysregulation meter was yelling. And then dads joined the Reflective Parent Club. And the more I worked with dads, I realized that they were not realizing that they were dysregulated when they were shutting down. This is not particular to dads, but dads helped me gain this awareness. And so here, with this information, we changed our entire model around dysregulation. We realized that we needed to see it as blue zone, yellow zone, and red zone. Blue zone is dysregulated when you're low in energy. So that looks like you shutting down, suppressing, wanting to be isolated, wanting to get away from it. You can be dysregulated this way in an argument. You can be dysregulated this way when you're scared, when you're mad, when you're anxious, when you're frustrated. And on the other end of this, you can be dysregulated with high energy. So that will show up as yelling and being very jittery and having lots of energy, just wanting to explode. In the middle of this, and sometimes we kind of are halfway between yellow and red, or halfway between yellow and blue. But the yellow part is when we're fully dysregulated. We are focused, we are calm, and if something happens, we won't react to it. We're going to respond because we will have the capacity to pause. And so it's really important for us to kind of come back to this as you are building your awareness. See this meter in your head and check in with yourself throughout the day. A brand new day of waking up does not mean that you are in the yellow zone, fully regulated. No, you can wake up in the blue zone. You can also wake up in the red zone. If you had an argument with your partner the day before, or a parent or an in-law, or maybe things aren't going well in your marriage. And so you wake up either in the blue or yellow or red zone. You have to kind of tune in with yourself. Emotion regulation skills help us manage emotions in healthy, flexible ways without becoming overwhelmed or shutting them down. So it's about how we manage these emotions. We're not kind of making them go away. They're going to show up. We can't make those disappear, but we want to be able to manage them properly. So we need the awareness, recognizing your emotional state in the moment. We need to control our impulse. We don't want to react. We need to be able to pause. We need to be able to label our emotions as well. So naming what you feel. Being able to say, I feel frustrated. And there are many parents that I've worked with that they've even used the How I Feel or How We Feel app that was created by Dr. Mark Brackett. And some parents didn't even know how to use that or couldn't use the app. And by the way, you can get that app for free. And they had to continuously use the app to try to build their vocabulary around different emotions. And so if you're somebody who says, I don't even know what I'm feeling in the moment, you can start with just recognizing if you are dysregulated in the blue or red zone, right? Just that is a start. But then eventually you do need to build your awareness around emotions, because studies show that when you are able to label your emotion, it's almost like you're surfacing it. You're bringing it to the surface and saying, ha, I see you. There you are, anxiety, rather than keeping it inside. And just the act of noticing it is already regulating to the nervous system. The fourth one is cognitive reappraisal. So, can we reframe a situation to shift our perspective, right? So, what does this look like? Well, we are maybe the managers of a team and we manage this team and somebody's late, we can shift into frustration and say, wow, I absolutely hate it when people are late and I'm really mad at this person. Or we can say, well, I wonder, okay, if maybe something happened with their kids at home today, I'm going to take a moment to breathe, continue the meeting, and go see them after the meeting and see what happened. Or maybe I need to set a boundary with them. The fifth one is soothing and coping. So, which techniques do you use to calm yourself? We cannot, as adults, expect other people on the outside to calm us. Some people might have that ability, but we can't expect it. There's a difference. And so we might use techniques like deep breathing or self-talk. Self-talk and deep breathing are both extremely powerful. But I've spoken to so many parents who say, I take deep breaths and nothing, it doesn't work. I'm still really mad and I still lose it on my child. Well, that's where the self-talk comes in. And we're going to have to build those skills here inside the Reflective Parent Club. Then there's goal directed behavior. So staying focused when emotions are intense. Like, this is what I need to do. This is the goal I have right now. And I'm feeling frustrated, but I'm able to kind of stay focused on my goal and not ignore. But for now, I know I need to ignore the fact that I'm really mad, but I need to give this presentation and come back to that person after. That takes a lot of practice. Just a little note about ACEs. So adverse childhood experiences. Many of us, actually over 63% of adults, or 64 actually, have experienced at least one ACE. There are many ACEs. And when we experience one of these, it could be a parent who had mental illness. It could be a parent who was incarcerated. It could be divorce. It could be emotional abuse or neglect, any type of abuse or neglect. Any of these can lead to having an ACE. And so not everybody will deal with an ACE in the same way. We know that through ACEs, there are higher chances that you struggle with regulating your emotions. And so if you did experience an ACE in your childhood, just know that emotion regulation might be difficult for you. Doesn't mean that you are doomed and you are never going to be able to regulate. Not at all. But like I said before, the self-awareness is the important first part. So if you've been in relationships and people keep telling you, you know, you're really not empathetic and it's really hard to build strong connections with you, or you keep suppressing your emotions and the only emotion I see in you is anger, or you're just always anxious and it's really hard to have a nice time and be calm around you when you're really anxious. These are all signs of emotion dysregulation, or maybe something bigger happening. But first, understand how you regulate your emotions, and that's going to help you. So, like I said before, we have a limited emotional capacity. And so, if you wake up dysregulated and your child spills milk, you are already on empty, depending on how dysregulated you are. And so it's really important for you to become aware of how dysregulated you are and what capacity do you have left. Obviously, we can't see it as precisely as this battery in this image, but if you work in a school and you're a teacher, or if you're a clinician and you're supporting young kids all day, or if you work in a daycare, these are all jobs that will require you to use up this emotional capacity. And so you show up with a smile all day, even if you don't have one of these jobs, but things are not going well in your life. Maybe you're struggling with something, your marriage is struggling, or you have a parent that's very sick and you put on a face to go to work. You are draining your emotional capacity. So what happens? You put on this face all day, right? Of everything is fine and everything is okay. And then you show up and your kids need you. Your kids are not at the level where you are. They are not able to regulate their emotions. As you will see in the tantrum course, kids learn how to regulate emotions because their frontal lobe develops, and their frontal lobe develops until the age of about 20, 25. And so that means that they need you for many, many years to come in order to regulate their emotions and help them co-regulate, not regulate them for them, but co-regulate. So, if we are on an empty, we can't show up for our kids in the way that they need. So, what drains us? Helping someone else with their emotions. When our thoughts are stuck in the past or in the future, we're consuming our energy, our emotional capacity. Or when we're feeling out of control for something. So that causes us a lot of stress. That is one of the biggest reasons why we might feel very anxious and stressed. We are thinking about the past or the future, and we are feeling like we've lost control. That is why gaining control of something makes us feel calm and at peace. And that's why some of us have to have a very particularly neat home because that's the only thing we feel we have control over. So it's not easy, but becoming aware of your emotional capacity is very important. As you will see, or if you haven't yet, the first part of in self-awareness under the reflective becoming a reflective parent course here inside the club is about addressing your core values. Why is it so important? If you haven't done so yet, I highly encourage you to go do this activity because, and then you can talk about it inside the club, or you can even come and share your struggles inside our weekly call, the Reflective Parent Club, the reflection call. So it's important for us to know what our core values are because let's say your core values are fun, well-being, and family. And maybe you have friends or family members that believe that a core value is loyalty and belonging. That's going to take you off your straightforward path of what you are aligned with. They're going to pull you to the side. And it is so easy to come off our path when we don't know what our values are because loyalty and belonging sounds great, especially, not especially, but very often when I'm doing this values activity in workshops and in-person workshops, parents talk about the values that are there saying, well, they're all important. And they are. They really are all important. But it doesn't mean that they're all your values. They can all be very important, but some of them, two to three of them, are your core values. And so if somebody says, loyalty is important to me as a family member, maybe this is your mom, your dad, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, and you're like, yeah, that's an important value, but it's not my value. I can't come to this event. I know that to you, it's me being loyal, but for me, my well-being or my family is more important. And we have a big event that weekend. I can't show up. I need to show up for my family. That is what's going to feel good for me. Or maybe you're burnt out and there's an event and you're like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to show up? I'm so drained. And so you need to break that, not go to that event and you know that person's going to be upset, but you know what your values are and you know that they're aligned with what you believe in. Does it mean that you will always have to do that? No, there's going to be some give and take. Maybe there's an event that you really don't want to go to when you are tired, but you haven't been to one of their events in a long time. And so you can break it this time. You can go. But if you consistently break your own values for other people's values, then that's a sign that you need to come back to your own. Same thing for work, as you can see here on the left, power, power plus power, right? So maybe you have a boss or a manager who's like, it's all about growing and power and money. Well, maybe it isn't for you. And again, knowing that your family and well-being are important, you will your values will help you know when to say no to something or when to say yes. All right. So part of what you're going to be discovering in the next 3 months is what regulates you and what dysregulates you. And, you know, it's not going to come easy. You're going to have to take some time to notice. If you haven't started a notebook yet, please grab a notebook, write the Reflective Parent Club or Curious Neuron or my self personal work or whatever you want to call it, self-awareness, self-discovery, the year, the month, whatever you want. But the goal is that you start to notice what drains you, what fills your battery, right? What recharges you. Um, which situations lead to you being in low energy dysregulation? Which situations lead you to being high energy dysregulation? Which people do you hang around with that bring you to low dysregulation? And which people do you hang around with that bring you to high energy dysregulation? I can tell you right now that you can probably find different people and situations that lead you to both. You might lean more towards either high energy or low energy in normal, like in when you look at it as a whole. But you might experience both, or maybe you don't, but there might be a chance. And so noticing that and noticing what regulates your brain, maybe going for a walk, maybe listening to certain songs, maybe speaking to a certain person, maybe journaling is good for you. Everybody will have a different way of regulating. I love going for walks. I love speaking about my issues to my friends, to my partner. I love spending time connecting with my kids. That regulates me. And it's also one of my core values. And so it really helps to get to know yourself. So noticing what regulates and dysregulates you. So environment or situations that make me feel off or fully regulated. We're looking at both opposites. So events that dysregulate me. Our brain is constantly scanning the environment, right? In terms of figuring out if it's safe or not. Sometimes noise, light, touch, a smell, a certain sound can dysregulate us, can make us feel like we need to go into fight or flight, or make us feel like we're going to need to protect ourselves. So if you are in an environment where there are lots of kids, maybe they're your own kids, maybe it's a daycare, maybe it's a school, maybe it's a clinic, a pediatric clinic, maybe it's an environment that you're in, maybe you're a police officer and then you're around lots of screaming, noise, I don't know. There's so many different jobs that have a lot of noise. And then you come home and you wonder why you're just so upset at your kids. Well, if you think of that battery, that also dysregulated you. And so the noise, your senses, think about your senses. They can dysregulate you. And so that means that you have to do the opposite to try to regulate yourself. A messy home. How many of us struggle with seeing a mess in our home? Guess what? It's dysregulating for the brain because it feels like it's out of control. Just noticing that and saying, my home is a mess right now, and it's making me feel dysregulated. Say it out loud, say it to your kids. They're going to thank you later on because they're also going to start noticing that messes might dysregulate them. And maybe, by the way, the mess is dysregulating your child as well. When my partner doesn't validate me, sometimes it's not just about the environment and what you see or hear, but it's what the words are, what words your partner is using or what they're not using, right? And so that can be something that dysregulates you. Maybe you had an argument and it leads to them not validating you and you leave that argument and you're dysregulated and it doesn't just last 5 minutes. It might not just last a day, it might last a day or two or three or a week or 2 weeks until you feel validated or months. Looking at events that regulate you, maybe listening to music, maybe being outdoors, moving your body is such an important one. Regulates most people, lots of research around that. And so knowing what regulates you the most can help you come back to it when you know that you're dysregulated. Are my emotions impacting my relationship? One of the most important things that I think can help people in conflict and in relationships is noticing the temperature of the conflict. So before, when we were talking about this regulation, we had this sort of image inverted, right? It was vertical. But now we have it horizontal because it's not just about us, it's about two people. So the conversation could be warm, and that means both parties are regulated. But the conversation could be cold, and all it takes is for one person to be in the suppressed zone, right? So maybe they're dysregulated and they're shut down. And if you have a partner that shuts down and doesn't speak up or doesn't contribute to the conversation, it could be very frustrating. And so noticing that they are in the cold zone. Also, we can have ourselves or our partner could be in the hot zone. That's when we're dysregulated and explosive. And so the reason why this is so important is because it's about monitoring ourselves, but also the person that we're having the conflict with. And so if we notice that the other person is in the hot zone, we have to ask ourselves, what can I do right now to cool them down? Similarly to ourselves, if we notice that we are in the hot zone, we have to think about how can I cool myself down? If both parties were emotionally intelligent, we would be doing that to each other. If somebody is cold, then you say, how do I warm them up? Usually validation, supporting them, helping them feel seen. Same thing for hot, actually. You want to feel validated. Validated works for both, but finding ways to support them in that moment can really help. There's one goal when it comes to conversations. I actually know there are many goals, but one of the most important ones is that it's never about winning an argument. The goal is to unravel information. And so if you come into a conflict or argument that way, rather than trying to prove your point and win the conversation, you can try to understand your partner's perspective. That's emotional intelligence being used in conflict. Noticing your patterns with different people. So where do you get stuck? Maybe somebody says something and you get stuck in a feeling. Maybe somebody says something and you get stuck in a thought, like, what do they really think about me? Do they really like me? Do they want to fire me? Maybe they don't like me at work. Some physical sensations. Many of us are not aware of the physical sensations that we have. And so noticing that our heart is racing or that our breath is very shallow. Noticing our level of dysregulation. Where are we? In the blue zone, the red zone? What does that look like? All of these, an event leads to some sort of trigger that we get stuck in these patterns, leads to some sort of behavioral output. It could be shutting down, it could be yelling at somebody, it could be saying something you regret. It will lead to any of these will lead to that. And so we have to be aware if we want to change the behavior, we have to understand where we often get stuck. Noticing your thoughts with others. And so the way we think about a situation, especially with others, can fuel our stress or calm it. And by shifting our thoughts, we can often change how we feel and respond. So reminding ourselves that thoughts are not facts. What is the story that I'm telling myself right now? So, for example, if you are in an argument with a partner and you think something, I don't know, I can't think of something right now, but um, you think they don't love me anymore. Is it a fact? Have they said that out loud? And what you need to do is question that fact, challenge it, ask them, get the data that you need. But oftentimes we tell ourselves a story. Our boss tells us to redo an assignment. Well, then we start thinking, they don't like me. I'm going to lose my job. They're going to fire me. That is not a fact, unless your boss has actually told you, if you mess this up, I will fire you. Oftentimes that has not happened. And so, is it a story that I'm telling myself? Number two is how can I reframe the situation to create even a small change in my own perspective? So, reframing is a huge part or component of emotion regulation skills. How do I reframe this? There's got to be a way. Again, we might not be able to do it in the situation, but if we do it after the situation happens in retrospect, slowly we'll start noticing it during the situation and we'll be able to do it on the spot. But it takes a lot of practice. The third is, would I be talking to my friend the same way I'm talking to myself? And so, if you are in a situation where you're being really hard on yourself, pause and ask yourself this question. Is there room to show up with a little bit more self compassion? Oftentimes, it's easier for us to show up with compassion for a friend, not for ourselves. And so, we have to kind of shift that. This is one of my favorite things to say to parents inside the Reflective Parent Club. Are these realistic expectations? Because oftentimes we have unrealistic expectations for ourselves. We have unrealistic expectations on our partners and even on our children. And what does this look like? Well, if we play, I don't know, maybe we place something on the stairs. I'm talking from experience. And we expect our partner to bring it up the stairs when they go. Well, if we didn't say it out loud, how are they supposed to know? If we leave the dishes intentionally in the sink, expecting our partner to clean them, but we didn't say anything, well, then it's an unrealistic expectation. If we expect our child to, or a 3-year-old not to have tantrums, well, developmentally, they're going to, most of them. And so it's an unrealistic expectation. We need to address these. Maybe the expectations on ourselves, by the way. Maybe we think that we have to be able to manage or balance work and life. That's an unrealistic expectation. All right. Also, understanding your needs. So many parents that I speak with, if I ask them, what are your needs? They don't know how to answer that. And so I really encourage you, if you can't answer this question, what are my needs, to start understanding what regulates you, because those are your needs. If music regulates you, then maybe you need 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day to sit, lie down on your bed, maybe sit on a chair alone somewhere, or go for a 10-minute walk, and listen to 2, 3 songs that really regulate you. Maybe you need to do that before bedtime with the kids, and that is a specific need that you have. Maybe you need silence at a specific time of the day, and you need to put on loops or some sort of noise canceling headphones. Maybe you need to talk about the end of your day, and so you need to communicate this. You can't communicate, or I can't communicate my needs to my loved ones if I don't know what they actually are. And your loved ones are your partner, your family, your kids. If you don't know what you need, they don't know either. Noticing your mood or your behavior. So, self awareness develops when we start to notice something more, right? And so, noticing that there's a shift in your mood or a shift in your behavior, that's important. And that helps us start the self awareness piece. Reflection is the best way to do this. I encourage you to take maybe 2 to 5 minutes every single day, or a couple times a week. No need to put the pressure on ourselves, but to really reflect on our day. What can I have done differently? What can I have said? What could I have said differently? I have, what could I have said differently that day? Um, or maybe I could have done better somewhere. But asking yourself this one question at the end of the day, maybe you reacted to your child a little bit too strongly. Maybe you reacted to your partner a little too strongly. Maybe you reacted to yourself a little too strongly. Not asking why did I do this, but what led to my shifted mood? What led to me being dysregulated? What led to those thoughts being so negative and so intense? What led to me being drained in my energy? What? Not why, but what? So, how do you start building your emotion regulation skills that support you as a parent? It's based on the art of the pause. So, the pause interrupts your automatic reactions. And so, when you become emotionally intelligent, when you start to build your self awareness, you can take a deep breath, and your child really annoyed you or frustrated you, or even your partner. Rather than reacting to them, you pause. It interrupts this response, this reaction. And strong emotions like anger, frustration can trigger this instant response. And so you have to interrupt it through the pause. It also activates the thinking brain. And so if you can activate your prefrontal cortex, rather than just using the emotions part of the brain, the amygdala, then you could think. The prefrontal cortex that's behind your forehead allows us to think and rationalize. We want to activate it. So taking a deep breath, one deep breath, maybe that's the time of your pause, and asking yourself, what are my needs? Or maybe addressing your emotion right now, or saying it in your head, my child is annoying me, is the start of all this. And thirdly, it builds emotional awareness. It builds emotional awareness. So when you pause, you can ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Or what do I need? Like I just said. All right. So what was modeled for me growing up? Understanding your emotional coping patterns is important. Reflecting on how these patterns have served you until now is also important. Just taking the time to see, like, What has led to this, these patterns that I have, or what was modeled to me? Again, it's not about digging deep into the past, but just being aware of how it's kind of built these patterns for you and how it's showing up for you every day. Being honest about changes you would like to see in yourself. Maybe you know that you shut down, and when your head, when you shut down and you're not speaking to your partner, you're saying things like, I'm just so unhappy, or how did I get here? Or I just don't even know how to speak to you about my emotions. I'm shutting down because I don't know how I'm feeling. But be honest with yourself. Being clear also about what you want to model for your child. Studies have shown, and we're going to talk about a few of them, and not just in this mini course, but throughout the Reflective Parent Club, suppressing our emotions is not a positive way to show our child how to cope with emotions, because we are not coping with emotions. Also, being extremely reactive is not a great way, and we need to find a balance as a parent. There are some emotion regulation skills that you should know about as well. So how about we start with the right side? So there are maladaptive strategies and maladaptive coping strategies, like suppressing our emotions, ruminating. So that's when we tell everybody everything's fine, but then we go home and we get stuck on a thought. I should have said that differently. I could have or should have done something different. I should have responded to that text. I should have gone in the lunchroom and had lunch with everybody. I should have. You should not should all over yourself. And so ruminating is another maladaptive strategy. Avoidance, seeing a certain situation or person that you don't want to deal with or know how to deal with, and so you just avoid it. Aggression, using anger as our strategy to just pretend we are dealing with the emotion. Substance abuse and addiction, and social withdrawal. Maladaptive strategies, according to research, are linked to mental health issues. And so, if we are stuck in this sort of strategy, there's a higher chance, if we are not in it yet, there's a higher chance of us struggling with depression and anxiety. People who ruminate have a higher chance of anxiety. People who suppress have a higher chance of depression. And so we have to be aware of that. Again, if we are doing this in our own home, we are modeling this for our kid. If you're constantly suppressing or constantly ruminating and stuck in your anxious thoughts, this is what we are modeling for our kids. And so how do we switch this? Because if they start to develop these patterns, then they will also have a higher chance of mental health issues. How do we switch this to adaptive strategies? Cognitive reappraisal is reframing the situation. How do I train myself to think differently and to reframe a situation that I might see as the worst possible day ever into it wasn't a great moment, but the rest of the day wasn't too bad? Problem solving. Okay, there's something causing me stress at work. I'm overwhelmed with the amount of projects that I have. And so the way that I'm going to solve this is speak to my boss and ask for fewer projects. There's got to be something that I can control in this situation. We often think that there are only things that we can or can't control, but there are things that we can influence in between. This is really important. It's an important part of positive psychology. And so when we realize that we can influence, maybe I can't control the number of projects, but maybe I can ask my supervisor for some support, and maybe I can influence them through the way that I speak to them and the examples I'm telling them. Maybe the whole project will be delayed if I don't get support, and the project being on time is important to them. And so I'm opening up and letting them know there's something we can influence. Mindfulness is also very important. How do I practice being in the moment? Because if my thoughts are stuck in the past or the present, I'm not being in the moment. I'm not being present. Seeking social support is also an important one. How do I, maybe an adaptive strategy I have is going to speak to a friend or a partner or a family member. Exercise, moving the stress, getting that cortisol out of our body through exercise, and gratitude practice. You'd be surprised. So, a couple of years ago, if you follow the podcast, I started a gratitude journal. And within I think it was, because this was a few years ago, I think 1 or 2 weeks maximum, I noticed a huge difference in how I felt during the day and also what I was writing about. At the beginning of my gratitude journal, I would write things like, I'm grateful for the sunshine. I'm grateful that I'm alive. I'm grateful that I have kids. Just like the typical, not that I'm not grateful for the sunshine, but as I continued writing, I had to write 3 things I was grateful for every day. By the end of this challenge, I was saying things like, I'm grateful for the hug my son gave me this morning, or I'm grateful that my daughter held my hand while we went for a walk. I started being much more specific. And I started noticing the small things. And so I really encourage you, if you haven't done so yet, to give yourself a 2 week challenge of writing a gratitude journal. The same way that we notice the temperature of a conversation with an adult, we do the same thing with our child. And so if our child is dysregulated in the hot zone, most probably our kids will be in the red zone, in the hot zone. They will be explosive. They'll be yelling. They'll be screaming at us. They'll be throwing things. They'll be stomping their feet. Well, that means we have to cool them down to bring them towards the warm zone. We need to regulate them. If we are also in the warm zone or the hot zone, sorry, a dysregulated adult cannot regulate a dysregulated child. We are both going to be stuck in the red zone. And so we have to first cool ourselves down, bring ourselves to the warm zone so that we have the brain capacity, the thinking capacity to support our child and show up for them in the way that they need so that we can cool them down. But if we are in the red zone, not going to happen. Not at all. So here are a few studies that I wanted to talk to you about. So there was this study called The Role of Fathers in Emotion in Children's Emotion Regulation. And I thought that this was a really important study. So it was a systematic review, and what they found in this study by looking at many studies with dads and their role in supporting their child's emotion regulation skills was that modeling dads had a very significant role in modeling emotion regulations for their kids. They also, providing positive reactions and support in response to their child's emotional expression also helped their child learn how to regulate emotions. It just was important. Basically, the whole paper can be summarized by the fact that when dads show up in a way that they have warmth, they show warmth towards their child and they are responsive to their child's emotional needs, then that child will develop and build strong emotion regulation skills. It is so important. It is a healthy way to show our kids how to manage our emotions. And we've seen these studies with moms, but this study in particular stressed the important role of dads and the climate, the emotional climate they can build in the home. There's a big responsibility on dads. And so I think we're in the right time now to realize that we don't have to suppress our emotions and we don't have to do that anymore. And that by showing our kids how we feel, we actually teach them how to regulate that emotion. The second study I wanted to highlight with you was another review. So maternal, emotional, and behavioral regulation, dysregulation, and parenting practices. So both of these studies, by the way, can be found inside the Reflective Parent Club, and they're summarized for you so that you can have a deeper look at these studies. But this study in particular showed a strong association with parenting. So that 86% of these studies found significant links between maternal, emotional, and behavioral regulation and from the parenting. Let me actually summarize that. So I have my notes beside me. But what this means is when a mom is able to regulate her emotions around her child, she will see better behavioral management in her own child. This is very important. And so, really understanding the importance again of a parent. We saw it before. A dad will show their child how to regulate their emotions, and a mom's ability to regulate her emotion will help her child with their behavior. And so, it's really important for us to understand that when we struggle with our emotions, there's a higher chance that we're going to mistreat or not show up for a child in with warmth and responsiveness, and which is what we want. And so learning how to regulate ourselves is the most important thing. I don't know if you've heard this before, right? But being strong, what does it mean? And so I like to look at it differently. When you are emotionally resilient rather than emotionally strong, so is your child. So saying things like, it's okay to feel sad, worried, mad, or scared. The importance is learning how to not get stuck in it, right? So when your child is sad, say it's okay. It's okay to feel sad. I don't want you to pretend you're not sad, or I don't want you to pretend you're not scared of something. It's okay. But how are you not getting stuck in that emotion? I'm here to help you with that. That's emotional resilience. Or saying things to your child like, I will help you learn this when you are young, learning how to regulate your emotions and how to not get stuck. But eventually, you will need to do this on your own. So you are going to be co-regulating with your child and helping them not get stuck in their anger. That means you are not getting stuck in your anger, but you have to tell them that eventually they need to learn how to do this on their own. I see emotional resilience as ups and downs, right? We're going to get angry and get out of it. We're going to get excited and get out of it. We're going to be sad and get out of it. We're going to be anxious and then get out of it. We don't want to get stuck. So, do you ever get stuck in an emotion, or can you flow in and out of it? That is emotional resilience. Here's a mindset shift for parents. Emotions are not bad behavior. I know that we see it that way. There's the bad behavior is a result of not knowing how to cope with that emotion. There's a difference. So, giving your child a consequence for their tantrum or their anger is not, maybe you need to address and set a boundary. That's okay. But if you are only doing that and not teaching them how to regulate their frustration or how to regulate their anger, then they will not learn how to do that and they will not change their behavior. Showing up with not just calm, but confidence and also openness to emotions will show your child that those are okay. But it doesn't mean that they can kick you and yell at you when they're frustrated. You can learn about this, by the way, more in part 3 of the Becoming a Reflective Parent course, or in the other mini course called The Science of Tantrums. All right, so let's start here. This is the part that I like, kind of summarizing everything. I want you to start by noticing your patterns. Notice the emotions you are avoiding. There's a shift here in what I said. When we start to notice the emotions that we avoid, we can then start to notice how we are avoiding these feelings or emotions. Are you grabbing your cell phone to scroll? Maybe you're bored or lonely or sad, and so you scroll. Maybe you end up yelling at people or trying to gain control of things, and so you, instead of feeling anxious about the event that you have tomorrow, you organize your house and you avoid thinking about how anxious you are about this event. Noticing, number 3, how avoiding doesn't help you move past this emotion. You get stuck. I want you to start noticing these 3 things and notice the emotional and any physical signals. Welcome them. Welcome the emotion. I'm anxious about tomorrow. Okay, that's great. It means I care enough. Or there's something I haven't addressed. It's telling me something. Say it out loud. Address the needs that it's communicating. Like I said, like a boundary, or maybe asking somebody for support or help. Get curious about it. Show yourself some compassion. Also, don't get mad because you're anxious. Don't call yourself dumb or stupid or weak because you shouldn't be anxious about a talk you're giving at work. No, it's okay. Many people have social anxiety, for example, right? That is self-compassion, opening it up to the rest of the world and realizing you're not alone in this. And then take action. Whatever it is that you need to do, do it. All right. That is the end of our course. And I hope that it helped you understand emotion regulation skills a little bit more broadly. Kirsten Neuron is here to help you build emotion regulation skills. And so hopefully you will see through this course that education is not enough. We have the education piece through our podcast, through the Reflective Parent Club. There are many educational components to the Reflective Parent Club, all grounded in science. But more than that, you need to build the skill. And the way that you build a skill is through practice. If I were to put you in a tennis tournament tomorrow without ever teaching you how to hold a racket or how to hit a ball, backhand, front, whatever it is, how would you perform? Well, if you've never played tennis, probably not well. Well, if you've never taken the time to learn how to cope with emotions, tomorrow you will not show up in the way that you're hoping to. Maybe not. And maybe not the day after. But the more you become aware of it, okay, I did it again. I yelled at my child. Oh yeah, it's true. It's because I haven't had the conversation I need to have with my partner. Or I let my mother call me again and she put up all her own emotional burden on me, and now my battery's empty. Okay, I see the pattern now. That is what I'm hoping you can build here inside the Reflective Parent Club. And if you are not already listening to the Reflective Parenting Podcast, make sure you do so on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I hope you enjoyed this course. I'll see you on the next reflection call. Make sure that as you are doing the work, you bring up your self-awareness and bring up the challenges that you are having inside the club. You can post about it or come chat with me on Tuesday. See ya. Bye.